Hey, I'm so glad you joined me back here for the next version of our Gold Nuggets, which are leadership lessons from mining for gold. I love to talk about leadership. I love to think about it and how it works and helping you to be the most effective leader you can be and multiply your influence. But also, I love sports. And so I am combining in these sessions two loves, leadership and leadership development and the world of sports. So I'm taking a page out of the playbook of the Last Dance that just happened, where they talked about the Bulls dynasty and the career of Michael Jordan when they won their sixth NBA championship in 8 years. And I just loved watching it. Many of you have. So now that that's over, I want to offer into that space some fun things to consider and ponder concerning literally the career of Michael Jordan, basketball, the NBA. Those are things I love to talk about. Very briefly, my background is Michael Jordan went to North Carolina in the fall of 1981, and I watched them win the championship from the TV, but went over to Chapel Hill I think it was April of 82 when Michael Jordan hit the shot. I was in Chapel Hill up in a tree watching the celebration of that national title, the first one for Dean Smith. But then that fall, I enrolled there at North Carolina, in University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I was at school at the same time as Michael Jordan, watched his amazing career unfold there, and watched live basketball games in Carmichael Auditorium. I got to know, by being around that, his coach, Dean Smith, who's a legend. That's what I'm going to talk about today, is the power of a coach. But I also lived in Wilmington, North Carolina for 10 years. My wife and I, two of our children were born there. Beth and I both went to UNC Chapel Hill. And then I've just had these connections. I actually met Michael Jordan. I'll tell that story at one point on a plane, and got his autograph and briefly chatted with him. He wouldn't remember me, but I did meet him. And so I have this just love for basketball, love for North Carolina basketball, ACC basketball, the NBA, and this whole Last Dance thing is so much fun. So it's ending, but why don't we just continue the conversation? So here goes. Today, Gold Nugget number 4 is simply the power of a coach. And I just, I love coaching. I love to talk about it. I wrote a book on it called Mining for Gold. This YouTube channel is about mining for gold and developing coaching type skills to develop and draw out the potential and the power and the gold that's in individuals. So today I want to talk about the power of a coach, combining basketball and North Carolina basketball in particularly, and leadership. And I want to talk about the man Dean Smith. So I got to tell a story to kind of introduce this. When I was about 10 years old, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and NC State had won the national championship in 1974. And this was probably a couple years later, it would have been about 75, 76. I was 11 or 12. State had just won the national title. But a friend of mine's dad worked in the concession program at the University of North Carolina, and so I got to go over there and get on an apron and sell Cokes and popcorn and peanuts at North Carolina athletic events. Started in Kenan Stadium watching football, but the one I love the most is when I would get a chance to go into Carmichael Auditorium, which is like a small arena, ish the size of Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke. Small, old school, the whole room would shake when the people would get rocking. It was just a glorious venue. But I'm 11 years old, and this is what would happen. We'd be watching the likes of Phil Ford and Mike O'Koren and Mitch Kupchak and just all these, Dudley Bradley and all these amazing leaders and basketball players at that time. But what would happen is have to do my job, sell my Coke, sell my my wares. Everybody want Coke, but at the ends of the games, nobody wanted to hear anything, especially when it was close, and then everything would quiet down, and they gave us permission to sit down in the aisleways and just watch the games. And it was in those moments when I could focus and watch Dean Smith coach the North Carolina basketball team. And it was just this combination of the cheering and the noise and the passion that people had for North Carolina basketball, combined with the winning. They were winning teams, and they went on. I didn't right away, but in '82 went on to win national titles. But it was the program, the way Dean Smith led North Carolina basketball, the teamwork that he birthed among his players, the love that he obviously showed. I fell in love with Dean Smith as an 11-year-old, young kid who played sports and got to see it. So it sort of marked me, and it made me want to go there, and it certainly birthed a love for basketball and ACC sports, particularly North Carolina basketball as a kid. And so I want to talk about Dean Smith and the power of a coach. Let me tell you a little bit about his life, a couple quotes, and then we'll dig into some lessons from the life of Dean Smith. The first is to get to know him is Coach Smith was born in Emporia, Kansas. He's a Kansas native in 1931, same year as my mom was born. And he went on to play basketball at the University of Kansas for the legendary, wonderful basketball coach in the 50s named Phog Allen. I think it's still called Allen Fieldhouse, I think. But anyway, he's the legend there, and went on then to coach. And he's not tall. I think he's 5'10", 5'11", but he was a guard and played. I don't know that he was a star or anything, but he played there. And during that time, Kansas had a lot of success, had lots of amazing leaders, play there, and probably all that history. But at that time, as he was learning, coaching obviously caught Dean's eye, and then he came to work for a guy named Frank McGuire in 1958 in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And in 1957, they had won the national title, so they had some success. But they weren't particularly stellar during Frank McGuire. They'd won some games. And then in 61, McGuire retires and says to Dean, "Do you want the job?" So 30-year-old Dean Smith takes over the North Carolina basketball program in 1961, and for the next 36 years develops the North Carolina program into one of the premier basketball blue chip programs in the world, in the United States. And he retired in 1997 with the most wins at that time of any coach. They've passed him now, but he had 879 wins at the time that he retired. So he retired on top. He had won 2 national titles. And so if you hear that alone, that's one thing. But let me give you an underpinning from being up close and being a student there, somebody that just loved watching and paying attention, and year by year watching how Coach Smith would sustain excellence with teams. And every year they'd be good. Every year they'd come back. I think they had a streak of going to the NCAA tournament that's just almost unparalleled, 20-plus type years of every year being successful. And I want to say that it's the coaching that he provided and the mentoring that he provided to all these young basketball players. A couple quotes, and then I want to get into some of the material that I selected as lessons. Today's message is the power of coaching and what it does, and when done well, what it can accomplish. Well, the first quote I want to give, this is Dean Smith, just a quintessential Dean Smith. He says, "Basketball is a beautiful game when the 5 players on the court play with one heartbeat." Oh, it's got to be my favorite quote. It's a beautiful game. And I experienced that. I watched how he built teamwork and incredible players like James Worthy and Michael Jordan and Jerry Stackhouse and Anton Jameson and these unbelievable athletes. Phil Ford, were national type player of the year people. But he taught them that it was the beauty of team, the beauty of working with others, the beauty of being together as one heartbeat. Think about how hard that is. It's not easy to get star players with large egos to subjugate some of that individual energy to playing beautifully with one heartbeat. That sort of just describes Dean Smith. Another quote that I just wanted to grab for this Gold Nugget session on coaching, he says, a leader's job, this is Dean Smith, a leader's job is to develop committed followers. Bad leaders destroy their followers' sense of commitment. And so he was a leader developer, and he understood things like commitment, things like building brand loyalty to the North Carolina program and the values and the ideals that made up North Carolina basketball, which we who have lived in North Carolina or grew up here or watched it on TV or went there understand. And so bad leadership, he talked about, are those that don't destroy, that destroy people's commitment and sense of family and love and support for the cause. So Dean Smith, you can go on, and it's now the stadium there is called the Dean Smith Center in Chapel Hill. Beautiful place that was actually built while Beth and I were there. But so I want to get into the principles now. What makes a great coach from the life of Dean Smith? And I'm going to reference Michael Jordan quite a bit here, coming out of the Last Dance. In 1981, that recruiting year, Michael Jordan was one of the top 5 recruits in America. And Dean went down to meet with Dolores and James Jordan, which I know where their house, the road that their house was on. I actually worked at the factory in Wilmington where James Jordan was in the maintenance crew, supervisor of maintenance at the GE plant there in Wilmington. But came down to visit Michael. He was at E.A. Laney High School, and recruited him to come to North Carolina and be a player there. And he was, no one knew at that moment the potential. But the first thing that a key coach does is he believes in you. And this coach, Dean Smith, saw that Michael was greatly talented, but was inviting him into a program and a mindset and a way of leading, a way of maybe discipling or developing, basketball talent. But he believed personally in Michael, and Dean Smith had a way of making you feel as if you were the most treasured person in that place. And so when he was recruiting him, I'm sure that mattered. Michael had probably watched that, and he probably had offers from everywhere. I don't know those specifics. But he came. And if you watch the relationship of Michael Jordan, he and Dean Smith, Michael would often talk about just the figure that Dean Smith played in his life, and he would call him, and he would talk to him about options and decisions and things like that. And then when James Jordan was tragically murdered, he says Dean Smith really played a role in loving on him and being a father figure along with others. But certainly Coach Smith, as we just call Coach, just loved Michael, believed in him. That's a key to a coach. Seeing people, believing in them, really having a heart, not pretending, but really seeing and authentically knowing there's more in this person. There's gold in them. There's treasure there. This is what a coach does. Second, what Coach Smith did is he valued everyone, the Michael Jordans and the role players and those that carried the equipment. The program that he built was built really on love and value of the individual in the making up of a team. And so you just hear stories about the guys that weren't, star athletes and weren't McDonald's All-American recruited. They felt loved by Coach Smith. They felt just as treasured and valued because this is how Dean Smith was. He really cared, regardless if you were Michael Jordan and these other number 1 to 2 to 3 level lottery pick recruits, to the role players that got in at garbage time at the end of games. He loved them all. This is an important lesson for us as leadership developers, to love everyone and see the gold in everyone. That's a mining for gold principle. Everyone has value. Everyone has treasure inside them. And Dean Smith saw that in all of those players. Also, a great coach sees more in you than what you could see in yourself. There's a great quote from The Last Dance where Michael hits the shot in 1982, to beat Georgetown, and he says that at that point he went from Mike Jordan to Michael Jordan, and it literally catapulted him into another realm, hoping and dreaming of what he might be able to do with and become as a basketball player. But Coach Smith, as a coach, said, Michael was good. This is a great coach quote. He says, Michael was good in his freshman year, but he was way better in his sophomore year. So he's not totally impressed by just hitting the shot. Coach Smith trusted him to take the shot when they were down by 1 point. I mean, huge confidence. Talk about point number one, believing in you. He gave Michael the ball and said Michael should be open. He hits the shot. But secondly, he saw more. He saw that Michael had more in him. And this is what he said. He said Michael improved tremendously over the summer from this after they won the championship in 82 to coming back in 83, where interestingly enough, Michael became a player of the year, a national player of the year, and some of the polling. I can't remember if he was Naismith, but he was All-American certainly, and player of the year in NCAA basketball. But Coach Smith said this. He worked hard. He devoted himself to his craft. He worked on skills coming back in the summer. And then he said this, and by God's, by giftedness, he also had the raw ability with that hard work that his basketball went to a completely different level. So I love it that he trusted Michael. He believed him. He gave him the ball to make the shot that won the national title. But he also knows there's more. This is what coaches do. They see more. They know there's more. They're not. They both love and believe in you, and there's always this sense of challenge, which leads me to the next point. They know there's higher levels, and so they want to help you get there. These coaches do, but they also are not afraid to challenge you in your thinking, your approach, maybe your techniques and whatnot. So to watch Michael Jordan, as I did from the growth and development, and through The Last Dance, you could see it. He just had more capacity and more capacity and more capacity in basketball to where most of us, at least in North Carolina probably, but many would agree he is the greatest basketball player to ever play. It's certainly arguable, but that's my opinion. But the point is this. When someone has that high capacity and that ability to go to other levels, it takes others to say, there's more here. And what are you going to do about it, Michael? Or, I told the story about his mom, Dolores, when he was cut from the 10th grade E.A. Laney basketball team, the Buccaneers in Wilmington. She said, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond, Michael? And challenged him, and he worked hard and became one of the top players in the nation. See, this is what loving coaches or mentors or moms and dads do. They love you and affirm you, but also put an expectation on you that you need to rise to. Think about that for just a minute. Coaching's really, really important. I've done it over and over, and I've had it done to me, that people challenge me and say, hey, that's great, but what about this? Or, is there more? And what would you need to do, Tom or Michael Jordan or whoever you are? The coach says, what would it, there's more here, and are you willing to pay the price, and what would it take for you to do that? And I love that sense of drawing committed followers in that quote. Coaches draw committed followers to them. That's what great leaders do. And Coach Smith was a great, great leader. He shaped the lives of so many people. And so if it's the lower player who's not going to be, the star or get an NBA pick, he some of them went on to be coaches, great coaches that are coaching today in the game who played for Coach Smith or became doctors. And guys that I went to school with went on to be, careers and other things. But Coach said, well, how do you get the most out of what you've been given? What would be next for you? How can you become a contributor at a next level, and challenge them with the gifts they had. I just think coaches are always doing that. The last one that I want to cover today is they saw the entire person. Coach Smith saw the entire person. And so what's so challenging, I think, about star athletes is you could get enamored so much with their giftedness that you pull them to yourself to get your own fame, and you can almost use them to win championships or win games. And Coach Smith never, that I ever saw, used anyone. He saw the whole person. He saw, he would pray. I know he's a Christian, and there's a lot about his faith, but he would really try to sense what is going on here. One of the great things he did in 1967 is Charlie Scott was the first African-American scholarship athlete at North Carolina in basketball. And he was a pioneer in that realm in the South in the 60s. It was much like Jackie Robinson in baseball, but he was pioneering. And Dean Smith did that intentionally. He played down in Laurinburg. He was from New York. And Charlie Scott was a Hall of Famer, a basketball player, and went on to the NBA. But Coach Smith, you can read about it in some of his books. He cared for Charlie. He protected him. He saw that this was bigger than basketball and loved him. And it's an amazing story. He saw the whole person. There's stories in Michael Jordan. They'd laugh and they say, who was the only guy able to keep Michael Jordan under 20 points? And they'll say, Dean Smith. And they'll chuckle. But I think there's something bigger. I want to end with this. I think Coach Smith saw that Michael had unlimited, maybe even he didn't know the unlimited, how far Michael could go. But certainly Coach Smith saw this guy can go very, very far. But he didn't kind of bow in to just that talent. He helped Michael see several things. The power of him playing great defense. The power of that first quote, basketball's a beautiful game when 5 players play on the court with one heartbeat. The power of team. The discipline that you're a part of something larger, the North Carolina basketball program, and that there are values that go with that. There is relationships with the past players and the players that would be coming. And we watched this program as new recruits would come and they would learn from Coach Smith, and the teams would win. We all loved the winning. But Coach Smith did it in a way that saw the whole person. I know some of the quotes I've read is, he loved as much as anything just the developing of those young men and the relationships they would have after playing for him at North Carolina. So I want to summarize. Great coaches do these things. They believe in you with their heart and authenticity. They value everyone, not one star player over anyone else. Great coaches value all people and the contribution they uniquely bring. Great coaches see more in you, in the potential. They see the gold and where you could get to. And then the next one is they then live out a relationship of challenge with you and kind of call out the more and ask questions of what are you willing to do and pay in the way of price to get to the potential that you carry. What an incredible gift that is, to believe in you, see more in you, but challenge you. Coaches, great coaches do that well. And then lastly, they see the entire person. Michael Jordan is forever was shaped by those 3 seasons he played with Coach Smith at North Carolina. So as Michael went on to the NBA, he will often be quoted in things that his time at North Carolina prepared him to thrive into the NBA game. I mean, he has a quote in The Last Dance where he says, I'm surprised at how fast I'm doing and learning. And he was playing out of his mind as a rookie and won the NBA Rookie of the year that he was drafted. So there's so much here. Love to just talk about these things of North Carolina basketball, the career of Michael Jordan. I watched him. I'll just share one more nugget. That's just kind of, to me, it's humorous. So everyone knew at North Carolina, Coach Smith was not about having these, these big displays of self and showing off, and beating your chest. Coach Smith didn't teach that or encourage that. But against Maryland, I think it was in his maybe his sophomore year, he gets a breakaway along the right side of the court and cuffs the ball and does this rock slam, and it was entertainment basketball. And I can remember in my mind thinking to myself, my first thought was, oh my gosh, Michael Jordan's incredible, but what will Coach Smith think? I can remember that was my first thought. And I'm like, and I remember Coach Smith smiling. He didn't pull him out of the game. He's got this horse that is amazing. But I wonder what the conversation was after. But, Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan and went on to become the greatest out of North Carolina and on in the NBA, as some say, the greatest there. But I always remember, how would Coach respond to Michael's just becoming more? And this was how Michael played the game, with passion, creativity, athleticism, and it was like entertainment. Michael on the court was true beauty, basketball beauty, poetry in motion, people would say. So thanks for listening. We're going to do more of this. Today's the power of coaching and the person of Dean Smith and his relationship with Michael Jordan, and who he did with all the players that he had. I consider Dean Smith one of the greatest coaches of all time. So I love coaching. Hey, subscribe to the channel if you like it. I'll be sending out more things there. You can also go to tomcamacho.org and look at some of the resources there, or miningforgold.org. We also have a Facebook page on Mining for Gold. So all those are for you. They're helpful. There's resources there to learn how to become a great coach. And maybe one of us will turn into a Dean Smith in their sphere. But thanks for listening. God bless. Gold Nugget number 4, the power of a coach.